Good evening. This special meeting of the Board of Trustees is being held Thursday, January the 27th. The meeting is being called in order, and the time is 5:31. Everyone, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's proceed to item 3. Item 3 is our board workshop. A, healthcare program. This will be provided by our presenter, Mr. Mario Carmona, at this time.
Can you hear me? Yes? Let's try that again. Thank you, Board President Morales, Dr. Carmona, members of the board. The presentation prepared for this evening workshop includes a review of historical health plan performance and forecasts in addition to some recommendations. The information will be presented by our insurance consultant, Hub International, Mr. Randy McGraw. Ms. McGraw?
Good afternoon, Board President, members of the board. I'm Randy McGraw with Hub International, and I'm here tonight to review a presentation we gave the Finance Committee 2 weeks ago tonight, and then just to kind of bring everybody up to date on what I would call the forecast or the outlook of the financial performance of your self-funded health plan. And then you'll see in that presentation there are several recommendations and considerations for you, and that's really the primary purpose of the workshop tonight, is to go through some different ideas and things that you can think about as we march on through this current fiscal year and as it moves into the following year as well. So I believe you have paper copies as well. And I'm going to be going through the one that says forecast first, and then the addendum will be the second part of the presentation. Yep. There we go. So, seeing as I've been through the presentation with some of you already on the forecast, I'm going to try to move through that quickly, but always happy to answer any questions if you want to interrupt and stop me. And then dedicate plenty of time for the discussion in the addendum portion of the presentation. So just a couple of slides and things to kind of to frame the reference of how your health plan has been running. And actually at the at the Finance Committee meeting, we had claims data generated by your health plan through the month of November. But 2 nights ago, we received the December data, so we've updated it. So some of the numbers have changed relative to the Finance Committee version. But for all intents and purposes, there's not much change in the overall observations and results of the forecast too. So this first slide is really just to kind of give you an idea of the pace of inflation of your various categories of claims. And so you'll see there's a line for, the green line is the prescription drug pace of inflation, and the blue line is your medical side of your claims expense, and the gray bars is the overall pace of inflation. And this is based on a 12-month moving average, so each point in time on the line reflects or compares to the same point in time a year prior. You can see, as you look back, you can just visualize how things have been. But in the year of 2020, there was clearly some increases in the cost of prescription drugs being consumed under the district relative to the prior year. And then as you rolled into 2021, things actually began to decline. And same thing on the medical plan, it has been performing pretty well. And then just in the last few months, it's gone a little bit more on the uptick there. This next page we have, I refer to as our dashboard report. And there's a couple of key takeaways on this one that I've highlighted in yellow too, because that will come back in to discussion when we're in the addendum portion of the presentation. So basically what we have on this table is a tracking of costs of the plan, sliced and diced several different ways, and it compares the last 2 full years, fiscal years, and then under the current column in each one of these, under the left-hand side of each of the columns is your year-to-date performance, which is 6 months of the 12 months of the fiscal year ending in December. And so you can see that costs are broken out, so you can see the gross costs by medical and pharmacy. That middle section gives you an idea of where the utilization inside your plan is happening. And so you can see there's subscriber, that would be employees, spouse is a category, and children. And then in the bottom portion, same data split out between the 3 different benefit plans that you offer, your premier plan, your base plan, and your high deductible health plan. So if we skip over to the right-hand side, where it's highlighted in yellow, those are per member per month average costs year to date. And so that gives you an idea of I highlighted the section for by relationship and then also by your plan, because that'll come into play in the portion of the addendum when we discuss it. And so I highlighted to me, which I thought were some key numbers to take a look at in yellow. And so what you can see is it's telling us that so far, halfway through your current fiscal and plan year, the average cost of an employee per month is $540. That's how much healthcare employees are consuming on average. You can see that spouses is a little higher, $667, and that's normal in employer groups. There's a whole lot more employees you can see in that second to left column over there. I'm not sure where the pointer works. So it's not abnormal to see the claims for the spouse in a higher category, because there's only 667 spouses covered under the plan right now, as opposed to 5,265 employees on average through the course of the year. And then you have 3,736 children, so that's a pretty big number. So mathematically, if there's a spouse that has a large claim, because there's a few number of people in the data set, the average usually comes out higher. Over on the right-hand side, I put some notes there. It's not usually part of our presentation, but it will be helpful in our additional discussion. I call it the spread value, or that's the relationship of the cost between those 3 different categories. So in other words, if an employee is a value of 1, then the cost of a spouse is 1.24 times the employee. That's how much more spouses consume than average employees. And for children, you can see it's 0.44. So children are generally the better part of the risk in any employer group that you have. And I put the same spread values there for the prior years. You can see it stays pretty consistent. In the past, your spouses have been a little bit higher than employees than they are currently. But then again, the last 2 years are 12 months of data, and this one is just 6 months. And then when we look down below too, in the group category, you can see again in that relative cost comparison, if the people in the premier plan, where you have 3,600 employees, 3,360, is a value of 1. And then you can see in the base plan, where you have more members covered, there's 6,147 members there, and that's 0.64. So on average, the base plan people consume about 36% less in cost than the premier plan, which is, again, is not abnormal. The premier plan is your higher cost plan with lower deductibles and lower co-pays, and that tends to attract people with more chronic health conditions. And then you can see in your consumer-driven health plan, you have 170 members there, and that value of that consumption is 0.41 of the base plan. So people in the different plans consume healthcare at a different rate. And again, in the high deductible health plan, you've got a low number of people in there, and so it doesn't take much to skew those numbers. And clearly what it appears to be is that the overall health of the people under the high deductible health plan is probably better than the two other categories for the base and the premier plan. The next page is just summarizing high-cost claimants, and actually I'm pretty impressed with the performance for Socorro ISD in that they're ranked from highest to lowest. The district purchases reinsurance coverage to protect you from a catastrophic loss on any one person, and your deductible for that coverage is $400,000. And so I've got a lot of other clients here in El Paso and around the state, and it's not uncommon to see on that top line row 1 million, 2 million. I've even seen some $3 and some $4 million. But the highest claim going all the way back to your fiscal year 18, $942,000. That's pretty good. So overall, you don't have a whole lot of chronic conditions that are hitting the health plan, and things are off to a pretty good start halfway through the cost of this through this year. Another thing to take a look at on this one is the expected adjustment, the bottom row, and that's how much money Cigna has reimbursed the district for claimants greater than $400,000. So you can see way back when, 1.6 million, 370,000, 850, 1.1 million, and so far, halfway through the year this year, $50,000 of reimbursement. So overall, the risk is looking pretty good in this year. And some of these numbers we'll talk about again in the addendum portion. The next slide is just a graphical representation of the enrollment of everybody that's in the health plan. This is counting employees. We're the green bar in this current fiscal year, and you can see that between November and December, it looks like you've added close to 100 employees just in that short time frame. So in the earlier parts of the fiscal year, your enrollment numbers were down a little bit, which tends to happen, it looks like, historically, but they're approaching back up to the same levels where you were just in the last year. And this slide here, this shows you the percentage and total number of employees that are enrolled in each of your three plans. So again, your base plan is the most popular plan, followed by your premier plan, and you currently have, on average, 91 employees covered under the high deductible health plan. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, because when I look at this graph, to me, it begs the question of, there's not many people in that plan. Should we even offer it going forward in the future? And that'll be part of the discussion later. Our next slide is just tracking the average cost of consumption per member per month. And it's on the left-hand side is your medical claims. The right-hand side is your pharmacy claims. So one of the things that's good I see on the medical side is all those lines are pretty flat. They're not sloping up to the right, which would indicate costs are going up over time. When you look at the prescription side of the equation on the right-hand side, you can see that except for the year of, or the fiscal year 2020, the lines are all staying pretty flat. But for whatever reason in 2020, skyrockets, and we saw that on the trend for inflation too, pretty well just shot right off the grid. And then after we got to the end of that, last year it's been pretty stable. And this year tracking right along the same average cost as before. So those are good indicators there. The next slide was, after seeing the big jump in fiscal year 2020, we pulled a comparison of Socorro compared to other public entities that we monitor on a regular basis. And so you can see I've marked in the left-hand column, these are employer groups that are here in the El Paso County area. Second column shows you which ones are school districts, so that's kind of like your peer group. And then that middle portion, high deductible health plan participation, a lot of different employer plans, and we're on page 9. A lot of different employer plans offer high deductible health plans. Some of them have high participation in that plan, and some of them have about average. And then, of course, if Socorro, you're the yellow bar going across, it's actually pretty low. And the reason for highlighting that is under your high deductible health plan, The benefits are that you have a deductible, but no office visit copays and no prescription drug copays. And so the way that works is all of your expenses under the high deductible health plan count towards your deductible first. And then once you meet your deductible, then you have 100% coverage for the rest of the plan year. So the reason for designating that is for employer groups that have a lot of people in the high deductible health plan, that's going to distort the cost of prescription drugs on an average cost per person, because more of their claims are applying to the deductible as opposed to your people in the base and the premier plan. They have copays when they go to fill their prescriptions for generic brand or what's called non-preferred brand drugs when they fill the script. So even though you had that big jump back in fiscal year 20, you're still sort of in the middle of the pack in terms of average cost. You can see some of the ones that are lower up near the top of the grid. One of them, particularly the second one down, is not a school district, but it has a lot of people under the high deductible health plan, and the average cost for prescription drug consumption per month is much lower than where you are right now. And then you can see on the bottom of the list, you've got a peer group here in the El Paso area, about medium participation in the high deductible health plan, and their prescription drug costs are significantly higher than where yours are too. So we just wanted to take a peek at that to see what was going on after that big shift where you saw the line slope up. You know, how did that put you compared to your peers? And the chart answers those questions. This last one is just a combination of your medical and prescription drugs. We're the blue line at the top, currently in this part of the fiscal year, the first 6 months. You can see you started off pretty well with where you were in the prior 2 years. We went up a little bit going into September, and it's holding fairly constant from September through December. This chart here is our forecast for you to consider, because I know you have budget time coming up, and this is a big ticket item in your budget. And so without going through all of the math and the details, there's a couple of key things here on this slide. And the first one, most important, I tell my clients when we look at this, is if you just look at the lower right-hand corner, that's telling you if we needed to throw more money at the health plan, how much would we need to change, or what percentage of increase in funding would be needed. And so you can see that bottom line number is no need to increase rates as you move into your next fiscal year or your new plan year. Now, a key assumption there, you notice in the box on the right near the top, is I believe the district has already approved that you're going to transfer $4 million from the general fund into the health fund before the end of this fiscal year. And then the other key thing too on this one would be the second orange line from the bottom, or right in that category. It shows where your fund balance was for the health plan at the beginning of the year, and where we think it should be as you come into June at the end of this fiscal year. And again, this is assuming that the $4 million transfer takes place. So up above, we have on that gray line, target minimum recommended fund balance. That would be what we would say is a good number to make sure that you always have in your fund. That's like contingencies for the health plan. It's also an accounting entry to account for claims that have been incurred but not yet paid under the plan, because there's a lag time from the time you seek a service to when the plan actually pays for the claim. So you're looking good on the fund balance as you go forward. There's no need at this time to think about anything more than the $4 million that you're already budgeted for in this current fiscal year as the transfer. So things are looking good as you go into the next part of the year, or into the next plan year. So a couple of just quick comments there. The claims actually look pretty stable. I've already said these things. The high-cost claimants, pretty low there. That's impressive. One of the things, too, that the district has grappled with over the past few years is there's been a need to make infusions into the plan from the general fund. And then I know a couple of years back you increased the contribution that the district makes to it. Is currently $575 per employee that you put into the fund from the district's contribution. And then, as we mentioned too, the high deductible health plan participation is pretty low. So where we ended up in the the Finance Committee, these were some items for consideration and discussion, and this is what we're going to go through in the next portion of the presentation. But the first one, there was a preference from the district. Currently, your benefits start over again every July the 1st, which means your deductible starts all over again, your out-of-pocket maximums, all of those things reset on July 1. You travel through, this is on the same time period as your fiscal year. And so once you get to the end of June, then as you move into July, your deductible starts over, your out-of-pocket maximum starts over. So one of the preferences too from the district was to transition the health plan from the fiscal year plan year to a calendar year plan year. And by doing that, it aligns your tax-favored savings account or spendings accounts, which the IRS has regulation over in terms of when you make decisions on money that you want to set aside to cover your out-of-pocket expenses on a pre-tax basis. So right now you have that event happening in the middle of the year, and a lot of large plan sponsors would prefer to have their plan year cycle on the calendar year so that those accounts and everything lines up with the calendar year, makes for easier decision making by employees when they're trying to decide how much money do I want to set aside for either one of those spending accounts. The next item, and we'll go in more detail in the next portion, is I mentioned that you pay for stop-loss reinsurance coverage through Cigna, and there's two forms of that coverage. One is the individual coverage, which we talked about has a $400,000 deductible, and then the other one is called aggregate coverage, and aggregate coverage is intended to protect the district from a lot of low-level claims. So like right now, you don't have a lot of high-cost claims, but if the sum of all the low-level claims ever reaches what's called the attachment point, then Cigna would reimburse you for claims over that threshold. And so currently, the premium you pay for that aggregate coverage is about $86,000 per year. And then the trigger point, or the aggregate attachment point, currently is $73 million. So let's go back and take a look. The top part of this graph, so far in the last 12 months, you've spent $51 million on medical and claims expense. So for that $86,000 that Cigna is charging you, what they're saying is, if your claims were $73 million instead of $51 million, then for everything over the 73, we'll pick up the tab up to $1 million. And so you'd have to be almost 50% wrong in your forecast in order to trigger that. And so all of my other clients, greater actually than 700 employees, which you're far above that, we don't purchase aggregate coverage anymore. It's kind of a waste of money. If you look on this chart too, down in the middle, there's a line there that says the annual stop-loss expense, $2.8 million. So $80,000 of that is what you're paying for the aggregate coverage, and the other $2.8 million is for the individual coverage. If Cigna or any stop-loss carrier thought you were going to have a lot of claims, they'd be charging you a lot more than $86,000. So it'd be our recommendation, I think it's an easy decision for the district to say, no need to throw our money in that hole anymore. You're not required to have it, and you're not going to be able to stand the pain if you got to $73 million anyhow. You've never had an aggregate claim. It rarely happens. So strong recommendation there that drop that coverage at the renewal date on July the 1st. The other thing that we were brought on board to assist you with would be to conduct or help you conduct a request for proposal process for the administration of your health plan. And so the target for that would be, there's not enough time to get that done before your open enrollment begins in April for the start of the new plan year in July. But if we're going to transition that date to January 1, then there's plenty of time to do that and to make efficient decisions in time to have everything ready to go. And there'll be more details on some things I think you'll see are pretty interesting, is what you might expect from the RFP process. And then part of the other things too is to get the district away from having to make these infusions that you have into the plan. And so to do that, what we need to do is make sure that the rates and the contributions from the district, like your $575, and then the sum of all the payroll deductions, is enough money to cover the cost of claims. And then in all of the other things that were in this table. Catch back up with this. And so in other words, things are looking good on that forecast, but that's because you're putting in another $4 million right now, but it's not coming through in the regular monthly contributions to the plan. So one of the objectives would be, as Mr. Reza instructed, you've got to find a way to make $4 million go away out of our health plan. So I think we have got some good ideas to work with as we go forward. It's going to require one of two things. Either Cigna needs to really up their game in terms of negotiating contracts with area providers, or see what the market can offer you. And I've got some slides for that in the next presentation too. And in that discussion, there's also, right now you have what's called a Preferred Provider Organization, PPO plan. Most people are familiar with that now. That's an in-network benefit and an out-of-network benefit. You go in-network, you get a higher level of benefits compared to going out-of-network. So one of the things that's arriving on the scene, not only in El Paso, but everywhere else, is that there are what's being created called narrow networks, or accountable care organizations, which is basically the provider network, or you pick a hospital system primarily, and you create a benefit plan that channels people to that hospital system over the wide base of hospitals. So currently your PPO plan includes all the major hospitals in El Paso and pretty much across the country. But if we consider options where you're willing to offer a narrow network, not to take away freedom and choice from anybody, but to have two plans, we'll see some examples of that in the next part too. Then by channeling people to doctors that they already use or hospitals that they already use, can generate additional savings for you. Did you have a question? Okay. I'm going to move into the next portion. So if you notice, this is kind of the list of the recommendations that we kind of described in the Finance Committee workshop. To start off, though, first of all, it's a pretty common question that especially board members, teacher associations, everybody has, is how do I compare to the people that I compete with? In other words, other school districts here in the El Paso area. So this isn't a detailed description of all the benefits that are offered, but it's the key parts of any benefit program. And so there's 2 pages of it. Your other peer districts in the area are listed alphabetically. And so Socorro's in the first columns there on the left, you can see a quick description of the benefits that you offer for your premier, your base plan, and your high deductible health plan. And then down below, it shows that the district is contributing the $575. And then the next section is monthly payroll deductions for each of those tiers that employees elect, as well as for the plans that they're in. And then down below, I've just added your contribution to that to come up with what you would call your total rate. And so, for example, you can see actually your payroll deductions compare very favorably across the board with all of your peers here in the El Paso area. And one of the reasons is you're contributing the $575. There's only one district in the area that contributes more than Socorro, and that would be Canutillo, and they currently contribute $623. So, you know, one thing that I looked at here was, since most of the people are in the basic plan, how does your basic plan compare to everybody else's basic plan? And they don't necessarily have the same deductibles as you, but I would pick the basic plan from Canutillo to be somewhat comparable to your basic plan here. And so then down below you can see you charge $60 a month for single coverage, they're at $50. You beat Canutillo on the employee and spouse. You beat Canutillo on employee and children. And you beat them pretty handily on employee and family. You can take a look at the Clint School District, your neighbor. They only contribute $321 per employee. They have what I would call a narrow network. The HealthSmart network that they use is similar to a narrow network that I mentioned before. But you can see now, especially when you get down, and their best benefit plan that they have is going to be their PPO plan, which is a $3,500 deductible. So that's almost the same as your consumer-driven health plan, except that it does have co-pays for everything. Their consumer-driven health plan, very similar to yours, actually identical, but you can see too, for family coverage, they charge $944 a month, and you're at $535. And Canutillo, you can read those as you see fit going across. The El Paso School District has two plans currently. This is just showing the plan that they operate through Cigna, and you can see their payroll deductions are much higher than yours also, with the exception that for their consumer-driven health plan, there's no cost to employees, so it's free. And that means all of their eligible employees can get free coverage if they want to under the high deductible health plan. But under their dependent categories, you're still beating them. The next page is Socorro compared to the San Elizario School District, as well as the Isleta District. And so again, the story kind of repeats itself. San Eli contributes $550, Isleta contributes $512. So the district score is really good on its contributions to the health plan. The score is really good on your payroll deductions to employees as well. So this next slide is just to give you again the aggregate coverage. I went ahead and just put it in there, drop it. You really need to drop it. So there you can see the total claims that you paid in your current year to date, $25 million so far this current fiscal year. There's that $50,000 that Cigna's already repaid you, so you subtract that. So your net claims are that $25,000 figure, and their attachment limit for the same period of time is $36 million. So again, they're saying, give me $86,000, and if your claims were $37 million, I would give you some money back. But we'd have to spend $10 million more to get our money back, and we don't want that to happen. You can see in the last couple of fiscal years also, same results there. Clinic steerage, and that was one of the things too that was a hot point for the district. I know it's important to the board and the employees, and that is, what can you do to move more people into your clinic to take advantage of the free clinic as well as free generic drugs, which you dispense through the clinic also. And so here's a couple of ideas on that, is that when we were looking at that, bounce back to this one. There are some line items there that detail the cost of the clinic as you operate it. So in a 12-month time period, you spend about $988,000 operating the medical portion of the clinic and $271,000 of overhead expense on the operating of the, not just overhead, but overhead plus actual drugs dispense, $271,000. And so in looking at some of the clinic reports, you're definitely saving money. Every person that uses the clinic saves money compared to if they'd just gone through a doctor and billed the claim through the health plan. Generic drugs, they've got fairly good participation, but it's not quite at a break-even proposition yet, revenue versus expense. Then the question was, what can we do to change that? And that one would be a pretty easy fix, I think, to help drive more people into the clinic for either of those two services. And that is, this is a more detailed version that you provide your employees of your benefits from each of the various plans. So if you notice, for urgent care, your urgent care copay under the Premier and the base plan is $35. That's the same amount that you would pay if you were to go to see a specialty doctor. So if you were to kind of rank order the cost of physician office visits, primary care visits through the health plan, pretty low, somewhere around $100, $110 per visit. Average specialist under the health plan, depending on the specialist, it can range, but you should really think of starting at like $150 and moving on up to $200 just for the office visit alone for specialty care. Urgent care is, the total cost of that claim is typically like $130, $140. It kind of approaches the specialty care category. And part of the concept behind having the specialty care copay is to encourage people to use urgent care for after hours as opposed to run into the emergency room, which is going to be a lot higher cost proposition. But it's pretty rare that you find the urgent care copay the same as a specialist copay. So then, and it's only $10 off from a primary care copay. And then, of course, if you were to go to the clinic, there's no copay. So one way to get people to wake up and recognize that there's more value on the medical side of that equation would be to raise the copay under the base and premier plan for urgent care. And so you kind of make that copay more proportional with the actual cost of the care that's being delivered through the urgent care. And by raising that, that should redirect more people towards your clinic when they're seeking medical care. And the other one is even more apparent, is that if you notice under the base plan and the premier plan, generic drugs are free. No copay under either one of those plans. So if it's me that's a consumer here, and I'm passing by a Walgreens or a CVS or whatever, I can stop in, fill my script, and get it for $0. Or, in the meantime, you're marketing to your employees to say, come on over to the clinic, get your generic drugs, and it's $0. So again, there's not much monetary incentive there for people to come to the clinic for the generic drug, unless perhaps they're already using it. So if we were to implement a copay for generic drugs under the premier plan and the base plan, and say we set it at $10, there's a lot of generic drugs that fall even below that $10 cost. And so maybe it's, some of them might be $3, $4, $5 for ampicillin, amoxicillin, things like that. So if we did that, then that would create another reason for people to come to your pharmacy and make a more efficient choice in terms of consuming generic drugs as well. So in terms of benefit changes, the only thing that we'd recommend, if that's what your objective is to drive more people through the clinic, would be to just change those two copays, urgent care and generic drugs, on July the 1st. People can still get free generics, and they come to the clinic to do that. I think that I've toured the clinic, it's very impressive. I think that as more people go there and they see it and they get used to it, then that cross traffic from the drug utilization will help expand the medical portion as well. Plus the change in the urgent care should start to redirect more people there as well. So the high deductible health plan, keep it or drop it. And so part of the discussions that we had, and you can see too, this is that same chart in the earlier part of the presentation. So again, you can see the average cost of the consumption in the consumer-driven health plan is much lower than it is in the other categories. So the more people that participate in that plan, the better financial results you could expect from your utilization. So, but not everybody wants to have a high deductible. And one of the key provisions of the high deductible health plan is the ability to set money aside into a health savings account. And so there's a lot of times where people will tell me, well, Randy, if a person in the premier plan that costs $540 or whatever per month moves into the consumer-driven health plan, just because they move into that plan didn't heal their chronic conditions. They're still a higher consumer of health care. But, and so the answer is if we do that, it's just all going to work out the same, and people like having copays and things, and I understand all that. So what I wanted to show you too, these are results from the County of El Paso, and all of our other clients that adopt a consumer-driven health plan strategy can show the same results. So over there on that left-hand side, that's the moving average cost of the different plans, and the county used to have 3 plans. That green one was their buy-up plan, and they dropped it at the start of 2020, and now they only offer 2 plans, the consumer-driven health plan, which is the blue line, and then the red line is their base plan, which is similar to your base plan. So when you go back and look back around 2017, there weren't that many people in the high deductible health plan. And you can see over here, there's just 365 people in it back then. And then as time went on, more and more people gravitated towards the consumer-driven health plan. And the question, like, why would they do that? And the answer is cost, plus the county contributed money to a health savings account, which an employer can do. And that money becomes immediately vested to the employee, and it's theirs to keep. You don't have any use it or lose it provisions. It can roll over from year to year. If you accumulate a pretty large balance in there, you can put it inside investment accounts. And if there's gains in there, the gains are non-taxable. And when you take that money out of the plan, it's non-taxable as long as you take it out for a qualified expense, like something that you would have owed a copay for or part of your deductible, and then a few other items. So there's a separate handout you have. I wasn't going to go through it. It's just 3 pages, and it gives you a comparison of a flexible spending account, which you do have, and the health savings account, which you have those available, but the district is not contributing any money to that. So if we were to go back, so like in this case here at the county, every now and then the commissioners will ask me, are you sure this works? I'm not sure it's worth it. But you can see too, this is on a average person per month. So there's almost $200 a month reduced cost compared to the people in the base plan. And if you multiply that out, that's $2,400 in a year. And so what the county does is say, I'm going to take some of that savings, I'm going to give it back to the employee. If they enroll into the consumer-driven health plan, they put that money into their account at the very beginning of the year. That helps the employee offset any expenses they might have right away. Because a pretty common question is, so you're telling me, Randy, on the first day of the year, and I take a really expensive drug that costs $3,000 a month, it's going to cost me $3,000? And the answer is yes, that's how that works. In that case, maybe the consumer-driven health plan, high deductible health plan is not for you. But if it's the flip side is I go to the doctor every now and then, doctor visit is $100, I don't have $100. Well, at one time the county was putting in $1,200 a month, and that's when, per year, and that's when you can see the jump kind of went up. And then these last couple of years, they've toned it down to $600 per year that they put into the health plan. But there's a lot of employees that are accumulating the money, and they can put some of their money. So the same money that they might have put into a flexible spending account, which has a limit on how much you can put in, and if you don't use it in a year, you forfeit it. They could, if they were doing that now, they could switch to the consumer-driven health plan, take that same amount of money and put that they're saving by going into that plan, and then also money that they're putting in the flexible spending account and add it to their health savings account. Now, if you don't use it, it just continues to roll over year after year after year. Anybody have any questions for that? So part of what that chart is to show you is that even as risk migrated, so you can see in our in the red part there, our buy-it plan, going back to that chart you can see in the green part, that's a lot of those high-cost people. As they move down into the other 2 choices, you can see the red line, the base plan, still accelerates faster than the consumer-driven health plan. So part of the magic of the consumer-driven health plan is when it becomes your money that you're spending, you you start to make more cost-conscious decisions. So I had a visit with a doctor this afternoon myself, and he was saying, everything's looking pretty good. I can send you to a specialist. I can order all these tests. And my answer to him was, if I don't need it, I'm not just here to go out and throw money at doctor's offices. If everything's working to my expectation, then let's not order any more tests. He wanted to say, like, do you want to do a CT scan? Like, no, I don't want to do a CT scan. I have a high deductible health plan. So what it does is sometimes if it was, yeah, you can go get a CT scan and it's going to cost you $50. Okay, I'll go do that. Now it's if you're going to do a CT scan and it's going to cost you $1,000, like, if I really need it, then I'll do it. And I have the money in my health saving account if I wanted to spend it, but I don't want to spend it. That S stands for saving, and that's what I want to do is save it. So you can see even as risk migrated across into those other plans over time, the consumer-driven health plan does not accelerate as fast as the others, and that's because it's changing people's behavior once they figure out how to use it. So I believe in the consumer-driven health plan. I understand it doesn't work for everybody. So it wouldn't be something that a lot of people say, well, you're just trying to get me to do this. And my answer might be, well, I'm really just trying to help you make intelligent, factual decisions, because you may be spending a whole lot more money on your premier plan in terms of payroll deductions and your out-of-pocket cap, et cetera, compared to the high deductible health plan. Let's go back just for a moment to there. So you can see, even in your premier plan, it's got a low deductible, but your out-of-pocket maximum is $3,500. So people in that plan are paying more money than the people in the base or the premier plan, but in a worst-case catastrophic scenario, their health care budget for the year is the sum of their payroll deductions plus $3,500. Now we swing over here to the high deductible health plan, worst case scenario, $3,000. So I'm $500 better off. If I'm a high consumer and I know I'm going to ring the bell for this year,
Randy,
then I'm picking that one. It's a case of pay me now or pay me later, but I have the funds and the resources to pay now and not pay such a high payroll deduction. Yes?
I have a question, Randy. So on the high deductible healthcare plan, it says 100% after deductible met. Of $3,000, it'll be 100% after $3,000. So if they get a surgery that costed them $100,000, they wouldn't get a bill after that. Whereas if, say, we went to the base plan, and they're at the 80/20, and they had the same scenario, of course, they paid $1,000, and they had a $100,000 surgery, they would get a bill of $20,000? Is that correct? Is that the way I'm understanding that?
Under
Because they're 80/20 under the base plan.
base plan? So the deductible, you have under the base plan, you have $1,000 for any one person
Right.
and $2,000 for the family.
Mhm.
So if there were 4 people in my family and we each had met $500 of our deductible, then that would satisfy the family limit. So you just aggregate those and add them up. And then that out-of-pocket maximum is all of the money that you pay, or now the new word is cost sharing. So that's the sum of your deductible, plus any co-pays that you pay to doctors or for prescription drugs. And then under the base plan, once you have met your deductible, the plan pays 80% of the coverage or the cost, and the member pays 20% until it adds up to $4,000 for the individual. So the worst case scenario for any one of those plans is $3,000 under the premier, $3,500, $4,000, and $3,000.
Gotcha.
And then again, for the family category, it's higher because there's more people that are there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so good news, bad news for me. My wife had surgery January the 10th, met the deductible in the first week and a half of January. But I'm almost at the out-of-pocket maximum, and that means I could have free health care. I will have free health care for the remainder of this calendar year. So even knowing that, when I'm having the conversation with the physician this afternoon, when he says, do you want to order a CT scan? We can check things out, make sure it's all good. And even though I'm like, yeah, I've only got a little bit more money to pay and then it's all free, what do I care? Well, I care a lot because I know everything that gets consumed goes into this equation, and that's what pushes the cost up. Plus, I just, if I don't have to, it's not broke, don't fix it. I don't want to go to a doctor if I don't have to. I don't want to get a CT scan if I don't have to. There's some people that say, it's free, why not? Let's go check it out just in case. So that's what you've got to do, is change that mindset of people where they're making decisions that benefit not just them, but the health plan as well. So this part here, this is really just to kind of prime the discussion, because when it comes to the consumer-driven health plan, keep it or leave it or drop it is kind of where we're focused on this. And so one of the observations here, and I put your payroll deductions, the district contribution and payroll deductions all on the same grid right here. And one of the reasons I can tell that you don't have much participation in the high deductible health plan is if I'm a single employee, which is where most of your employees have coverage, and you can see on this line here, it shows you how many people are in each one of those categories. If you tell me, Randy, would you rather have a $3,000 deductible and 100% coverage? Or would you rather have the $1,000 deductible, be able to go see the doctor for a copay and get your drugs for a copay and things like that? And either way, it's going to cost you $60. Most people are going to say, give me the one that has the copays, because it's easy to come up with $25, $35, $10, $40, whatever for a copay, as opposed to under the high deductible health plan, I go to the doctor, I'm going to pay the full bill until it gets to that $3,000 mark. But you can also see too, is I put these relativities, or no, the relativities on that other one. The consumer-driven health plan costs much less than the base plan in terms of consumption, and that's not that abnormal. 40% compared to the base plan. And it's even below, I'm sorry, the premier plan. And it's even below consumption on the base plan. Yet when you look at the payroll deductions, it costs about the same. So it's $60 either way for a single person. The difference to cover your spouse is $5 a month, and compared between those two. The difference to cover your kids, $25 per month. The difference to cover your family, $7 a month. So the way that you have your payroll deduction set and your total rates, et cetera, is not reflective of the value of that plan in terms of how much it reimburses you for your health care expense. So the plans where you don't get as much reimbursement should be lower in cost than the ones like the base plan or the premier plan. So I would refer that to rebalancing. I don't want to scare anybody, but this is just to show you how rebalancing might work, and how what you're basically doing is right now you're contributing the $575, but if somebody said, how much do you contribute toward the cost of my dependents, the district would say nothing. We just give $575 per employee. But the reality is that $575 is picking up slack on the dependents as well. So if you notice in the bottom row there, across the bottom, the red number at the bottom, your current payroll deductions and your contribution strategy drive $50 million of contributions to the health plan. And this reshuffled version would also drive $50 million to the health plan. The only thing we're doing is squeezing the balloon and making the premier plan more reflective of the actual cost relative to the base plan, relative to the high deductible health plan. So step one to getting things back on track and making it more of an industry standard is to change this spread. So remember on that other sheet I said this is the spread, and what the spread means is if an employee is a value of 1, then employee with a spouse, that's 2 adults, and spouses cost a little bit more, should be 2.1. And then for employee and children, 2.3, I'm sorry, 1.3, 2.3, and then 3.6 if you add all those together for a full family. But the current way that you have things spread is your payroll deduction amount or the total rate amount of 1, and then for a spouse, you're only factoring that up 50%, you're not doubling it. So you're fooling yourself because, you know, 1 adult plus other adult equals 2. In this case, it would need to be 2.1 because the spouses cost a little more. But the way you have it set on paper for your rate, it's only 1.5. And for the kids, you're at 1.3 relative to the industry standard would be 2.3. And then for family, you're at 1.8. You're heavily subsidizing the family, and your employees appreciate that, but it just looks wrong on the paper. And then when you come down to, if you set the rates to tier with the relative risk, you can see that when you get down to the consumer-driven health plan, you could also offer that plan for free if you wanted to. Or a lot of employers said, I want it to be free. I want everybody to have some skin in the game. And then the next step, once we have the rate properly set to address each of the categories of benefits, the next part is for the district to say, how do I want to subsidize that? And so you could still say, from budget purposes, it's $575. But for this grid purpose, you can notice that in the Premier plan, it's $393. I've set them all down and lower. So the $393 would match the consumer-driven health plan cost to make it free. And then if you kept that same dollar figure in each one of those categories, as an employer, what you're telling your employees is, I'm going to give you the same amount of contribution no matter which plan that you pick. Doesn't matter to me. This is what we're going to pay. You make the choice. And then there's a bigger spread between the payroll deductions. Payroll deductions are always going to be cheaper under the high deductible plan. It's the lower cost plan. And then they step up to the other two. So this isn't a recommendation, but it's just to get that out there, because this would be, if you want to keep the consumer-driven health plan, then you might as well reshuffle the rates and make it more attractive for people to participate. If you want to keep doing it the way that you've been doing it, then quite frankly, I'm not even sure it's worth offering it, because there's really no payroll deduction difference between the base plan. That makes sense? So this would be not anything that you have to decide upon right away, but this would be something that we wanted to get in front of you. It's not an easy discussion to have in a formal board meeting, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you in the workshop, and happy to come back and have additional meetings too, and play what if and juggle these numbers around. So step one of this would be, what can the district afford? Tell me, is the number still 575, 600, whatever it's going to be? And this is really just a big algebra problem. So once we know what you're going to pay, and we know what the district total rate should be, then we can reshuffle that money around to make the payroll deductions change relative to the benefits and the tier where people enroll their employees. So, the discussion about transitioning to the calendar year. So there would be a couple of things that would need to happen. And first of all, your deductibles and your co-pays reset again coming this July. That's on track and it's all good to go right now. But if we did that in July and then we switched the plan year to January, from your employee's perspective, it would be, well, my deductible went back to 0 and I got to meet it again through December, and then it drops back down to 0 and I got to meet again in January, and they're not going to be very happy about that. So one way to make the transition would be to say, and it's going to put a little bit of pressure on the utilization on the front end, is that to say for this July, only benefit change we would make is urgent care copay, generic copay. Everybody's payroll reduction stays the same, and bonus, your deductible stays where it is. So if you've already met your out-of-pocket maximum at the end of June, you're going to get a ride all the way through the end of December without having to incur any additional costs. So that puts a little pressure on the plan. But what it does is it helps transition the employee to the new year without causing a lot of angst and confusion for them. And so that would be just what we call a short plan year. And so then you'll still need to have your open enrollment, which is scheduled for April, where people can decide if they want to switch between plans for July the 1st. And then if we're going to go to January 1, then we need to have another open enrollment in the fall, because things could change. By then, we'll have done the RFP. You may or may not have selected a different administrator for your claims. You may or may not have decided, I want to change payroll deductions or contribution strategies or plan designs. I may or may not offer the consumer-driven health plan, so they'll need another open enrollment in the fall for January 1. Your flexible spending account plan also cycles on this current fiscal year, and that one would have to have a short plan year, and that's okay. This is not as painful, because then employees just say, I'm going to only, if they were pledging $2,500 in a year, they might say for this plan year, I want to just pledge $1,250 or whatever, and because they're going to get a chance to change that election again come January. The reinsurance contract would also need to be changed. Your administrative contracts can rock on along without any disruption in terms of the fees that they charge. The stop-loss contract will be up for renewal, and so Cigna will be coming back with some rate changes most likely, even though you've given them $2.8 million and they've only paid you back $50,000. I'm pretty certain they're going to come in and ask for a rate increase, and then we'll just have to negotiate with them. And then my usual position on this when we make a transition like that is they'll go ahead and price everything out with their aggregate coverage and their stop loss. We let them give us the offer, negotiate the individual part, and then at the tail end just tell them, oh, and by the way, we're going to drop the aggregate coverage. And the reason for that is you don't want them playing some game where they say, well, if I knew you were going to drop that, then I'm going to add it over here. We don't want that to be happening. So we'll hold off on that till after you see how the renewal is looking there. And this second to last one, same thing that we already talked about, minor benefit change and no changes in the payroll deductions, and then move on forward as we head to January 1. And then this also allows us time to conduct the RFP. Not a whole lot of time. We want to get started on that pretty quickly because it's a big process. It's an important process. Requires a lot of lead time too. So in order to be prepared for open enrollment, say late October, very early November, we need to know who we're going to be doing business with on January 1, ideally somewhere in July, August timeframe at the very latest. Because if there's going to be a change in administrators, we're going to have ample time for consumer education and preparations on the district side to change the way you exchange information. So, this one I think is pretty impressive. There's two things that happen that carriers will talk about, and those will all get fleshed out during the RFP process too. And the big ticket item is their ability to negotiate price with their preferred providers. And so we just call that the discount or the discount factor. So I can tell you, even on my wife's claim, we did it over here at Sierra East, 45-minute outpatient surgery. The hospital billed $66,000 for that. I've got Blue Cross coverage for myself. The Blue Cross allowable negotiated rate was $16,000. Big difference between 66 and 16. So that's the discount part. That's the negotiated rate versus what I would just call the rack rate. The other things that networks and carriers like to talk about and brag upon is their ability to offer you programs to help support and incentivize your employer or your employees to seek care at the right place at the right time and become better cost-conscious providers, et cetera. So there might be a program to help manage diabetes or hypertension and things like that. I just refer to it as the black box. So everybody has a black box, whether it's Aetna, Blue Cross, Cigna, whomever, and they have this black box that says, inside this box are things that I can do to make that consumption go down, whichever tool it is they have in the box. Everybody has one. And so, in my side of the business here too, is every time we have this discussion about what's your discount rate, then a lot of times the carriers will say, Randy, it's not just about the discount, it's about what we do to help manage care. Okay, so I get that. I've been doing it for a long time, but your current discounts with Cigna are shown up here on the top. So in the prior 2 years, you averaged 58% off the billed charge, or call it 60%. So then my $66,000 bill from Tenet would have gotten knocked down to about $20,000 or so, or 24, yeah, closer to 24, 25 as opposed to 16. My discount through the Blue Cross network was much better than what you're seeing on average with your results from Cigna. So you notice 2 years back was 58.4, last year was 61. Year to date this year, 65.7. Why did it jump? Two things. One is Cigna renegotiated their contracts with the Tenet facilities and got improved discounts earlier this year, pretty much right at the start, or just right after the start of your current fiscal year. You can see that being reflected there too. The other thing too is the more high cost claimants, the higher the frequency of that, the lower of the discounts. So there's diminishing scales of return. As the claim gets higher, hospitals tend to discount it lesser. So it's a combination of improved negotiations from Cigna and favorable, very low frequency, high dollar claimants puts you at 65%. So we've got a lot of clients here in the El Paso area with a lot of different carriers. We have clients that use Cigna, Blue Cross, Aetna. Not many use United Healthcare. Not many use Humana. Those are the 5 major carriers. Clint is using a rental network, or a network that's created called HealthSmart. So it's not a name branded carrier, but I know that their network discounts don't add up. But down here, this 70%, this is the average discount rate I see in my entire book of business across El Paso. So just by changing to a different contract, and it doesn't have to be a change, Cigna can come in, strong arm, if they can match the other competition, then that's going to be a huge improvement for you. So you can see down here on the bottom number, if you had had the 70% discount, which I see year over year over year here in El Paso, that would have been $34 million of additional savings that comes out of the equation that says, here's what I billed, here's the discount, take out your deductible and your copay, and you pay the difference. So just, I mean, don't even have to do an RFP. Just take the names of those other carriers, pull one out of the hat. They should all be able to hit 70%. Cigna's currently lagging in the marketplace here. And they know it, because when we talk about this, or if they are watching on YouTube, then I'll get a call that says, Randy, you know, it's not just the discount, it's all the things we have in this black box. Well, that ought to be a really good black box to make $34 million disappear. It's not going to happen. So I do expect the RFP will be beneficial for this school district, and whether or not it remains Cigna, because they are able to strong arm any of their providers to try to get better discounts, it would be favorable for the district. So even though this first 6 months or the last first 6 months of the new plan year, this short plan year, are going to show a higher than average claims cost because we're not resetting the deductible or the out-of-pocket maximum. Once we get past January 1, you're going to make it up quickly in the reduced cost. It can be exactly the same benefits. People are going to exactly the same dollars, but the cost is going to drop. The last one is really kind of a housekeeping thing. And just to put that out there too, is Express Scripts administers your prescription drug program for you. And back in September of last year, legislative session, there were some bills that were passed. The primary one's called House Bill 1919. And what it does is it's actually a bill that favors non-corporate drugstores, mail order houses, et cetera. So it basically just says you can't, if you're what's called a health plan issuer, which you're not, you're a health plan. The health plan issuer is somebody that sells the health plan, like Blue Cross or Aetna, where you would go and buy insurance from them. That makes them the health plan issuer. So the bill was written to say that health plan issuers can no longer, by design of their plan, make people have to buy their drugs at a certain place. So for example, specialty drugs, the high-cost specialty drugs, you have a program that says if you're going to take a specialty drug through Express Scripts, you have to buy it through Express Scripts through their specialty drug vendor. You can't just trot down to CVS or Walgreens and say, I need this high-cost drug. For the high-cost drugs, you have to channel it through the other direction. So the legislature is trying to put the brakes on that, redirect monies back to local, regional pharmacies, which is good for them, but not necessarily good for the health plan. So I've got a lot of other clients here, and I'll pass on around the state, where we've read the bill, the PBM, except for Express Scripts, has programs to say, we're going to channel you to a specialty drug. They also have some other programs that I believe you have your toes kind of stuck in the water, dipped in the water on that too, that maximizes rebates that come back from the pharmaceutical manufacturer. So when it comes to rebates right now, for every brand drug that you have that goes through the equation, then every quarter, Express Scripts sends the district a check averaging somewhere around $1 million per quarter that comes in rebates, and those are transactional rebates just based on the fact that I bought a brand drug that triggers a rebate coming back to the district. The reality is pharmaceutical manufacturers have a whole lot more money budgeted for the coupons or the rebates than what are channeling into the market. And so there's a program too where behind the scenes, if we set the plan up to say, if I want Eliquis, it's no longer a $60 copay. I have to pay half the cost of the copay. I have to pay half the cost of the drug. And then the program says, you agree to this program, we'll fill the gap because the maker of Eliquis has an $8,000 budget for rebates, and they've only been giving you about $200 of that through their normal rebate. But by changing the way that the drugs get paid for behind the plan doesn't impact the member. They're still going to have their same copay, but what it does is you show that to the manufacturer, and then they'll give you that $8,000. So I've got a couple of my clients that have been on this program for a few years. One of them only has 2,000 employees, and the rebates just from that one program by itself is $1 million. The sum of all the rebates, and that's only 27 people out of their 2,200. That's the utilization off those 27 people, drives an extra $1 million coming back into the plan. So the House Bill 1919, if I was a health plan issuer, would say, you can't do that anymore. So or late last year, Express Scripts started streaming information at you saying, we've been monitoring the legal environment in Texas. This is a Texas rule only. And we believe that you can't participate in this plan anymore. Therefore, we're going to go and turn off all these different switches, which is going to push the cost of prescription drugs back up for you. And so I went round and round with them to say, I don't believe that, it's not my decision. It's going to be your decision and your legal counsel's guidance too, whether or not you think this bill impacts you or not. Express Scripts has dug their heels in. They say, we think that you have to comply. And I say you don't. And I've got lots of clients that don't, and all across the state, lots of them that don't. So Express Scripts is saying, January 1, we're going to have to do this. But I pointed out to them too, if you actually read the bill, it says for any plan that is issued or renewed after September 1, your renewal date's actually July. They didn't pay attention. They were thinking it was January, so they were trying to get you to drop this. So we've got to be called off until July, but that would be another key decision that the district needs to make with the assistance of your legal counsel, and we're happy to participate there in the dialogue as well, because just because Express Scripts says you have to doesn't mean that you have to. And so I don't believe that you have to, but I think that's an important provision too, for the district to look at and make a decision on And that one would need to happen before July 1. I believe that's all my prepared comments. Do you have any other questions or comments?
Quick question.
Sure.
You mentioned there was based on renegotiating with another contractor or something, we can get a potential savings of 70% per claims, right? It was that last slide, with a total savings possible of $34 million.
That's what the difference is between a 70% discount rate and what you've been experiencing over the last 2.5 years.
Okay, so something like that would undoubtedly cover that $4 million you say that the district pours into the plan every year to offset the costs. If we were to start looking for another.
So that savings amount is now, this is just based on what's called the allowable charge. It's not taking into consideration how much the plan paid for deductibles or co-pays or things like that too. So it wouldn't be that you would save $34 million, but it's going to flow into that equation. And then you can see even in this current half a year, that's a $3 million differential in the first 6 months of average market conditions to compared to where you are. And so that would be like $6 million in a year. By the time you change that in, by the time you subtract out the member share of that, that's going to easily be a $4 million difference. And there's your $4 million so that you don't have to keep transitioning money from the general fund.
And we don't have to mess with premiums and deductibles based on what you have here.
And that's just simply what providers
what you're
are allowed
projecting.
to charge. They charge, so you can see too how crazy it is. They charged $66 million is what they sent in to Cigna. And Cigna's like, nope, our agreement says it's only $43 million. So they did knock a considerable chunk out of the way, but not as much as it would have been had you had any of the other major carriers.
Okay.
And provider networks are pretty much comparable too. So in terms of, unless we start going into the tiered networks like a narrow network or accountable care organization. If you branch, this is just straight PPO versus PPO. If you were to consider introducing a narrow network or something like that in addition to the plans that you offer, let's go back to the beginning. So for example, on this slide here, 2 of your neighbors have adopted an ACO model. These two, Isleta and San Elizario, both happen to use Aetna, but you can see that some of their plan designs say ACO, and you can see too under San Eli. So under San Eli, what we do is we say there's a regular PPO plan, or if you're willing to use Tenet, that's the favored partner of Aetna, then we'll give you a break on your payroll deduction, but the benefits are actually the same. So if I'm in the decision-making situation and I look at the provider network and all the doctors I use are inside of the Tenet ACO, easy decision for me. I'll save some money for the same benefit, go to the same doctors I always have. It's just that by moving it into that category, you get a break from Tenet on that one. Same thing with Isleta. So usually that differential works out to be about a 10% reduction in cost on the average risk, PPO versus ACO. So if you just the savings part alone are those numbers, and then if you did the same thing to say, I'm still going to offer the premier plan and the base plan, PPO, and then here's the same premier and base plan ACO, ACO is going to come in 10% reduced cost relative to the other one.
What you're saying is essentially that the plans that the employees have right now, making certain modifications, not really changing their out-of-pocket or their deductibles, there's a good chance that we can keep their rates and their premiums the same without affecting them.
Yes. And that's good to go right now, even if you stayed with Cigna for the duration. Let's say we don't change to the calendar year, and it's just business as usual, you're good to go with no benefit changes, although I'd still suggest you do the urgent care and the generic drug to help move people into the clinic, maximize the value of that. Because you have fixed expenses there, whether people use it or not. We might as well get more people so we get good bang for the buck.
So
Yeah,
in that-
it doesn't, there's no need to change anything right now if you just wanted to continue on business as usual.
But I guess the question I guess I'm asking is, we're gonna be able to save the 4 million and not have to be pulling it out of the general fund to put it in there.
To do that, you'd have to find somebody that generates a better discount. And it could be Cigna. So in the RFP process, we'll jump everybody through the hoops to make them prove what their true negotiated rates are, and then rank the comparison between each of them. So I do this for a living all across the state. I've got a pretty good feel for how things are going to look. Things change all the time, so I'm glad Cigna went back and improved their contracts with Tenet, because you can see the immediate impact there, and that's just strictly due to those things right there. But there's other better mousetraps out there that could save you even more money for the same plan design, same doctors, same hospitals. And that would be easy $4 million low-hanging fruit.
I mean, I'm pretty sure, I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but at least for myself, I just want to make sure that the district is saving money, but at the same time, we're giving the employees the best healthcare coverage. I would not want to increase their premiums and leave them good the way they are, because I know our healthcare is good, but I don't want to have to keep pulling it because it's out of the general fund either.
Yeah, to do that, we have to get into this bottom half of the environment. And if Cigna can come in, so I have this other rule of thumb too, is, and we talk to the area hospitals frequently, I'll just call it the opposite theory. If I went to Mr. Tejeda, head of Tenet here locally, and said, hey, I've got a client, they're trying to decide if they want to pick Cigna, Blue Cross, Aetna, which one would you suggest? He's probably going to say Cigna, because that one gives him more money. So that's why I say whatever the hospital says is the best, I know it's the exact opposite, because they're all about making money.
I'm sorry, and I apologize for being late. Did I understand correctly? You're saying that we're $4 million in deficit right now, and on the budget, as far as when it comes to what you're explaining now, we're $4 million in, is that correct? We're $4 million in deficit?
Yes, sir. If you look at our monthly financials, we certainly currently have about a $4 million operating deficit. And I want to remind the board, last year around this time, we were looking at changing the base plan, or the plan design for the healthcare. And the direction that we got from the board last year around this time was no changes to the plan, and put in $4 million into the healthcare plan
Well, the
for
reason I
this
bring,
fiscal year. And
the
that
reason
is why we have told Hub International, the intent of the administration is in June to transfer $4 million from the general fund into the healthcare fund for the direction.
and the reason I bring that up, because since we've been on the board, the deficit was at 1.9 million, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't that correct? And so it dropped down?
Are we talking about the healthcare plan?
The healthcare plan?
No, sir. It was about $4 to $5 million last several years that we've had. And we put in, last year, we put in $4.5 million we transferred in. The year before, last 3 years before, we put in $9 million each
We
year,
put it in, we put it,
each
okay.
one of those years. So we ended up the fiscal year of '21 with approximately $15 million in reserves, or fund balance, so to speak, for the healthcare plan. But we did that because we put in $4.5 million at the end of '21.
Okay.
So our intent this year, per the direction of the board, is to put another $4 million. And as far as we understand, that's it. We're not going to be putting any more transfers. So I hope that answered your question.
Okay, that's what I was getting, okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to be clear about something. So the recommendation, obviously, is we feel that we don't have to make any changes to the plan, but we are recommending the change to certainly the urgent care, $75, and a slight $10 copay for generics if you're not using the clinic. Right? And then change the plan year. So
paid $86,000 and we just dropped the aggregate coverage. That's money you've just been putting down the drain.
I have a question. Are we gonna do away with the high deductible plan, or are we gonna keep it?
That's for your
Tony?
consideration. That's why we wanted to get this information out to you up front, so that you can be thinking, you know, if you want to continue it. If you do want to continue it, then I would say we should revisit how you have the payroll deductions, because right now, high deductible health plan almost exactly equals the base plan.
Right.
That's why your employees aren't taking it up. But if you, as the more people that move into that plan, the lower the cost is going to be. And then if you take some of that savings and incentivize them by putting it in their health savings account, then that money, plus the money they save off of their prior choice, plus anything they've already been setting aside in a flexible spending account, if they put all that money in their health savings account, then that will help offset the fact that there's no copays for doctor office visits or prescription drugs. So currently, on this little handout, it shows you some of the key differences. And I think one of the key ones is right at the top of the grid. So HSA stands for Health Savings Account. FSA stands for Flexible Spending Account. They sound alike. All of the tax-favored expenses, or it's called Section 213D of the IRS code, says these are all the things that are deductible if you were to file your income tax. So the FSA just lets you take advantage of that deduction up front. If you didn't do that when you file your taxes, you can still claim them, but then you have what's called the IRS deductible. IRS says you can deduct them, but only things that are greater than, I think it's like 6 or 7% of your adjusted gross income. So that's an IRS deductible. So the FSA and the HSA allow you to take advantage of that without having to clear that deductible. The other thing too, it's in the name, the spending account is meant to be spent. You set that money aside to cover your, you know, if, for example, if I'm diabetic, I know how many times I'm going to refill insulin, syringes, test strips, all those other things. I can decide up front, or maybe I know I'm going to have a surgery this year or whatever, I can set aside $2,500 or so pre-tax to help cover that, and I save money by doing that. But at the FSA, the money that you set aside, if you don't use it at the end of the year, then you forfeit it, and the money gets forfeited back to the district. So I call it the deal with the devil. There's some advantages for you if you have the FSA, but the gotcha is if you don't spend it, then you forfeit it. But the key difference in those two, because it's the exact same list of eligible expenses, is the other one is a savings account. So the health savings account has no use it or lose it provision. I set money aside into my health savings account. At the next year, it rolls over year after year after year. So it's roughly $3,500 per, $3,600 right now is the most you can put in it as an individual. For the HSA, $2,750 for the FSA. If I have family coverage, which means at least one other dependent, I can put up to $7,200 a year into my account on a tax-favored basis. Comes out of my paycheck, my money that I put in. If the district puts money in, it's not taxable to the employee either. And then it's there because it's not only intended to help you offset costs that you incur right now, but also as you get older, and let's say post-employment, we're all going to be consuming more health care. You'll have this nest egg that you can take with you when you leave Socorro to offset your deductibles and copays once you're covered under Medicare or TRS retiree care or whichever plan that you might have. You can take that money that you save, just like it might be in your 457 plan or your IRA, and you can roll it forward to your post-employment time. And anytime you take the money out, it's for a qualified expense, it's non-taxable. So the HSA, you can put it in non-taxable, it can grow non-taxable, and come out non-taxable. It's the most tax-advantaged saving type of plan that there is. So I believe in it too, and it's not going to be for people. I'm 62. When I become eligible for Medicare, I can't put any more money in my HSA. I can only put it in there if I'm covered under the high deductible health plan. So my goal over the last years is save, 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 so that when I retire, I've got this next nest egg of money that I can use to pay for my health care expenses post-retirement. So it's like I said, I've got plenty of money. I could have told the guy, get me the CT scan, I'll just hit my HSA, it's paid for, I've got the money. But that's not my goal. My goal is to save, save, save. So the statistics would say that for most people that are approaching retirement age right now, your post-65 healthcare expenses, your cost-sharing portion, to your end of your average life expectancy, which they use like 82, is going to be about $200,000. And so you can't save that much money in the HSA, but it's a good start. So, but if you were to tell me today, hey, Randy, next year we're going to put this money in the HSA for you, hooray, I've only got 2 years to go and I can't sock that much money away. But there are, you have a pretty good spectrum, and we have a detailed demographic report that became available today that I shared with the district, and we'll bring that back to the board for you to see too. But it helps you stratify your employees, and it shows you a comparison of how much they earn, how much they're spending on health care, what they might expect in the future. So if I was 30 years old today and I joined the HSA and I'm going to work for 30 years and I'm going to put $7,000 per year in there, now when I retire, that's a pretty good chunk of change. But with just these few years at my age, HSA may not be that attractive. So you can't just offer the HSA. At HUB, we have 5 different HSA plans we can pick from and 1 PPO plan. So we're big believers in that too. And I am a believer in it, but if you don't want to do it, or if you don't think it's right for your employees, you don't have to. But it's not going to be the cure-all for everybody. People still need to have a PPO plan or a preferred network or a narrow network plan that offers copays and things, because it's a lot easier to come up with that $25, $35 to see the doctor. The reality of it too, though, is that some people say, well, that HSA plan, that's the other way, I think. They say that HSA plan, Randy, I'll have to spend a whole lot of money in the very first of the year if I have a catastrophic claim. I've got news for you. If you're under the Premier plan, you had the same procedure my wife had done, you're going to hit your out-of-pocket money under limit under that plan on January the 10th, just like I did, even though I was covered under that. Because the way the math works out is $3,500, that's the sum of your deductible, your co-pays, and your cost share. If you go into the hospital and have a $30,000 claim, you're going to hit the $3,000 out-of-pocket limit just like that. But not everybody's going to do that. There are going to be some people that are just kind of steady as you go. So they need some help when it comes to decision making to understand the ramifications of their decisions. But you can see too, like at the County of El Paso or a lot of the other ones, I just picked that one because it's easy numbers to look at. City of El Paso is one of our clients. Same thing, same results there. Time after time, all of our clients, you see the same pattern. That is that if you introduce it and you incentivize it properly, and you have it where there's a price point decision so people can recognize the value of it over the other alternative, then that can also help drive your overall cost down.
So we are going to still look at it, Mr. Mena. I think it's important to keep in mind, as Randy stated, a lot of our employees are millennials or Generation Xers, and so I think it's something that they certainly are going to consider, but we have to incentivize them. That's the only way I think this plan is going to work. Something what the county's doing, putting $500 a year into their plan right off the bat to help them start off, because they're going to need some cash flow to be able to pay some of these things. So we're going to certainly look at that, sir. Sorry.
There's only 91 people on that plan.
Right now, sir, because we don't put in any money or we don't incentivize the plan. We have to change it in somehow. So I think it's something we have to look at and see.
Which plan is the plan that's, how can I word this, costing more money?
That would be the Premier plan.
So the Premier plan is the one that's costing more money? Okay.
Average cost of claims by itself in the premium for each member covered is $570. That's equal to the 575 you put in, because that doesn't include the fees you pay for stop-loss coverage or administrative fees you pay to Cigna, any of the other operational expenses. And also your clinic operating expenses are not included in here too. That's a separate line item. Base plan, so in other words, this was kind of the decision-making from this county. We went through the same process at Canutillo a couple years ago too. Is if I'm the CEO of the insurance company and I'm going to set a premium to cover that cost, for that high-cost plan like your premium plan, it needs to be a big number. And then every time I make it a big number, more people are going to pick the base plan because it's just too expensive. So as those people move out, that other line just keeps going up and up. You can see how it went over time. And so in reality, you can't charge enough money for the premier plan and make it be reasonable for your employees. At some point along the way, people just say, okay, we're going to close that plan, we're going to drop it. TRS did the same thing. So they had TRS 1 years ago. It was a rich plan, like a $200 deductible, low out of pocket, but it was just crazy expensive, and they pulled it out of TRS Active Care. So that's what's happening is at some point, the cost of the claims in that category can just be too high. So what you've got then also is you've got all the people in these other plans, plus you, subsidizing the cost of that really expensive plan. That really expensive plan doesn't require much consumer-driven thought process. It's got a low copay. What do I care? I'm sick. Doctor told me to do it. I guess I better go do it.
If there isn't any further questions, does anyone have any other questions for Randy? No, we're good to go. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Randy.
Just for the record, this presentation of the health plan performance and forecast was that was provided here to us as a board. There will be no action needed at this time, and I just want to make that clear. We can go ahead and move on to our next item. We're going to go to executive session at this time, unless anything else. Mr. Ressa, are we all set? Yeah? Okay, perfect. We'll move to item 4. This meeting is to be closed to consider administrative recommendations for assistant principals at Loma Verde Elementary School and Desert Wind School under Texas Government Code Section 551.074. The time is 7:08. We head up to executive session. We are back in session and the time is 7:42. Let's proceed to item 5, new business. Item A, 1, Assistant Principal, A, Loma Verde Elementary School. Dr. Carmona?
President Morales, members of the board, administration recommends Sonia Baez Morales to assume the role and responsibilities as the new assistant principal of Loma Verde Elementary School.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Eddie Mena and a second by Ms. Cynthia Nahara. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Next is the position at Desert Wind School.
President Morales and members of the board, administration recommends Roberto Guerrero to assume the role and responsibilities as the new assistant principal of Desert Wind Pre-K 8 School.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Cynthia Nahara and a second by Mr. Eddie Mena. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. If there is no further business for the board, this meeting is adjourned. The time is 7:43.